Bonjour, bonjour.
Bonjour.
Bonjour à tout le monde. Comment allez-vous? Ça va?
Très bien.
Très bien. Très bien. Bah, écoutez, moi, ça va me faire très bizarre de vous parler en anglais parce que la présentation est en anglais aujourd'hui. This is going to be a very strange experience. Bear with me. I hope I remember how to speak English. So welcome everybody to the Balade parisienne that my brother James kindly.
Hi, everybody.
There he is. That's him.
Bonjour, James.
Bonjour.
So he kindly agreed to put this together for us today, and I really appreciate it. Thank you, James. And before he starts, I just want to let you know that this is being recorded so that anybody that signed up but couldn't be present today will have an opportunity to watch it later. You guys can also watch it later. If you have any questions along the way, James would like it to be as interactive as possible. So you can put a question in the chat box, and James will stop a couple of times along his balade, his stroll, and we can address some questions. You can ask a question at that time, and then also at the tail end of the presentation, we'll have a few minutes for questions. During the presentation, I ask that you put yourselves on mute so that we don't have any background noises that interfere. And also that this is a little pilot presentation for us. So any feedback, after the fact is welcome so that we can do an even better job the second time around. Et puis, otherwise, I think we should just get started. And I'm going to let James introduce himself. Et voilà, les amis.
Well, thank you, Victoria. Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. I'm James Minette. I'm a freelance consultant in Paris. I'm a lifelong resident of the city. I'm also an avid Paris enthusiast. And I happen to be also Victoria's younger brother. So hello to everybody. And welcome to Balade parisienne. I wanted to start the conversation, or at least start the stroll with a question. Have you ever been to Paris? Who has ever visited Paris?
There's a number of people. Yep.
Okay. So we have, you know a little bit of Paris. And have you ever visited Montmartre? Okay, I can see that also. So some things will be familiar and some things might be new. And the goal of what we wanted to do is really give you a taste of life in Paris, and through what we call a balade. A balade is a walk, but it's more leisurely. It's really the opportunity to discover lesser known places in Paris, and we hope it's for you the opportunity to discover a new side of Paris, one that you had not visited before. So through the next hour, we're going to, I have introduced myself. So it's a 60-minute balade from the Église Notre-Dame de Lorette, which is at the bottom of Montmartre in the 9th arrondissement, to the world famous Place du Tertre. So during the balade, we'll stop at Place Saint-Georges, which is a charming place in Paris, the busy Rue des Martyrs, the typical square d'Anvers and its weekly farmers market, the funky Marché Saint-Pierre, the popular Été en Pente Douce, which is a really, really great place to have a drink at the end of the day, the one-in-a-kind Sacré-Cœur Basilica, and finally, the unforgettable Place du Tertre. So as Victoria said, although I'll be doing most of the talking during this hour, I would like this to be as conversational as possible. So I will stop probably twice during the balade, and please feel free to ask any question that you might have on the topics that I've covered during the program. So you can write them in the chat section. And we also have maybe 10 to 15 minutes dedicated at the end of the presentation to questions, comments, and feedback. So are you ready to start? Let's start.
Oui.
So I just put so let me first of all get a little bit organized on my screen because I had my notes, but I don't need them now. I'm flying solo without any notes. So I just put us a map of Paris on the screen to just show you basically the neighborhood that we'll be visiting. So on the the grand scale of Paris, it's a fairly small square, but you know that Paris is not a very big city altogether. So we're covering maybe like a one square mile perimeter. So it's not that big, and it's enough for us to kind of like leisurely travel through the neighborhood without having to rush. So let's start. So the first stop is so let me just show you. Oh, I forgot to. So we are at the bottom of the map, and a place called Notre-Dame de Lorette. I thought I had done a little map with where we were starting. So Notre-Dame de Lorette is a famous church in Paris. It was constructed in 1823 under the reign of Louis XVIII and was completed in 1836 under the reign of Louis Philippe. So it's very much a 19th century monument. And basically everything you're going to see during the balade, all of the monuments you're going to see are from the 19th century. If you know anything about the story of Paris, is that the development of Paris really Paris started expanding during the 19th century after the revolution and during the Industrial Revolution, which followed the actual revolution itself in 1789. So a lot of the monuments we're going to see here are within the scale of Paris, fairly new. Of course, they are over 100 years old, but it's not like Notre-Dame de Paris, which is in a different part of the city, which dates from the 13th century. Here we have most of the monuments dating from the 19th century. And you might therefore be surprised that you see a church that looks like a Greek temple or like more like a Roman temple. Well, that's because a lot of the monuments that were built at that time were built in what we call neo-classical or neo-baroque or neo-Gothic style. So they were a fresh, like a modern view of old styles that had existed during the Middle Ages or the Renaissance. So this is a fairly standard church in Paris, even though it looks very grandiose. You have a lot of churches like that in Paris. It was built as a replacement from a chapel that was destroyed during the French Revolution. So that's something you might hear a lot. And if you know anything about French history, is that the 19th century in Paris was a fairly hectic time. So a lot of monuments or churches or houses or castles were destroyed at certain moments of the 19th century and were then rebuilt. And we'll see that later with the Sacré-Cœur and other places. And like this church is famous also because some fairly famous people were baptized in the church. Georges Bizet, if you know him, he is the composer of Carmen, and Claude Monet, who's a world famous impressionist painter, were both baptized in this church. So that's another view of Paris. And really the city is part of the of the architecture, like the global architecture of the neighborhood. So it really fits perfectly within this fairly busy part of the town. So here you have on one side, so the Notre-Dame de Lorette sits on a fairly busy street called La Rue de Châteaudun. So if you go in that direction, you will reach the one of the busiest parts of the city, the Gare Saint-Lazare, which is a very dense area in terms of offices and shopping centers. And if you go oh, sorry, I'm going on the right direction, and to the other side, which is the Gare du Nord. So this street is usually very, very busy. And on the day I took this picture, it was fairly quiet, but I know from experience that usually when you get there, you cross the Rue Châteaudun around Notre-Dame de Lorette, it's usually packed with traffic. So a very typical part of Paris, like the mix of very of monuments and history mixed with the everyday bustle of Paris. So inside you have, this is the inside of the church, Notre-Dame de Lorette. And what you can see here is that although it's from the 19th century, it's obviously trying to copy the styles of the previous centuries. And here, most notably, it's trying to copy the Baroque style of that was extremely famous in Italy and in France during the 18th century. So the century before the 18th century, the century that was before the 19th century. So here they're basically copying styles that already existed. And that's something that you see a lot in the architecture around in this neighborhood in the night. As I said, it's new when it was being developed in the 19th century. And you can see here something that is very, very much was very popular during the Renaissance, which is a coffer ceiling. Like little coffers with little decoration inside. You see that a lot in Renaissance Italy or Renaissance France, and this was basically copied as an homage to the olden days. Also, at that time, if you remember how I introduced this this church, it was built under the Louis XVIII and Louis Philippe. So that's after the Revolution when monarchy came back to France. So there was very much the desire for the government and from the king to kind of reconnect to time when monarchy was ruling France. That part of French history is called Restoration. So sorry. So in addition to the coffer ceiling, we have a lot of frescoes and a lot of painted walls that are very similar to the Basilica of Santa Maggiore in Rome. So very much this need to emulate Italian style, which was still very much at the time, even in France, really like the epitome of international style. So you can see here, and I'm going to move my. If you look at the church from a distance, and if it's a clear day, you'll have this probably my favorite view of the Sacré-Cœur. So in the angle, you can see both the Notre-Dame de Lorette and the Sacré-Cœur in the same perspective, and it really is a truly wonderful sight. It's actually it's now in tourist guides, you actually see it mentioned. It's one of the best places to have like one in a kind snapshot of Le Sacré-Cœur. And here you have also on the left, you have the view of the backside of the church. And it's strange because most of the churches have been renovated, meaning they have been cleaned. Like the dark side of the church is actually filth from the pollution of the city. And I think it has already been, it was renovated, I think 20 years ago. So you really see that this is a very densely populated with a lot of traffic, because in less than 20 years, that port is dirty again. So they'll have to. So that was our first stop. Oh, no, I have more to say on this. And here you have the famous, can you still hear me? Because I got the message that my connection was unstable. So if I'm shaky, just tell me and I will do something for it to become a little more stable. So here you have the the entrance to the metro. A lot also is like how the metro stations are often connected or really like try to fade into the environment, since here like the metro station is just next to the church. And we'll see it in a few minutes how sometimes it's even part of the monuments themselves. So the metro, you probably have taken it. It's probably one of the best aspects of the city. It's cheap, affordable, and very easy to use. Sometimes it doesn't work, but that's life in France. But it really is a godsend when you are Parisian. It allows you to get anywhere in life in a minimal time. So now we are going to actually start walking. And so let me can you see my little arrow?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, okay, so we were here, like where the star is, and we're gonna go up this street, which is the street there, which is called, very, very, very original, La Rue Notre-Dame de Lorette. And we are going to walk towards a place called the Place Saint-Georges. So the Place Saint-Georges is, 5 minutes away from the Église Notre-Dame de Lorette. And it really is, one of my favorite places in Paris. It seems hidden from the rest of the neighborhood. I told you that it was like a very densely populated with a lot of traffic. Well, here it's an entirely different feel. You really have the feeling that from going from Notre-Dame de Lorette to here, you've entered a new neighborhood. So it's a circular place, which is not that rare, but on a small scale, it really gives it a charming feel, quiet, luxurious. It's extremely elegant with beautiful townhouses on each side. With the metro station exit, the railings, the old lamppost, and the fountain at its center, the square is emblematic. It's really an emblematic site of Paris. And if you ever go back to Paris, I really highly recommend that you check it out. Like the Notre-Dame de Lorette, it was laid out in 1824 as part of many different real estate transactions, but it really was the development of this whole neighborhood. It was developed by the Compagnie Saint-Georges, hence its name. So Saint-Georges comes from this company called Saint-Georges. And it has about a circular shape of 30.5 meters in diameter. So it really is not that big. And it gives it really like a wonderful, elegant feel. I really love it. So let me go back. So if you're looking at the place from this side, on your back is this beautiful hôtel particulier. So this mansion there's really no equivalent of what an hôtel particulier is. It's basically a townhouse that was built in 1824 by a famous industrialist called Alexis Daune. And in 1833, Adolphe Thiers, who was a very famous statesman in French history, inherited through his marriage with Elisa, who was Alexis Douane's daughter. The building was destroyed in 1871 during the Commune. And we'll talk about, oh, sorry, there's a little typo here. And we'll talk about the Commune a little later when we get to the Sacré-Cœur, but it was rebuilt in 1874 when Adolphe Thiers became the prime minister. So it really is, and now it's a foundation, which I think hosts art. So you have a better view. It really is here again, very reminiscent of the classical period of the Baroque. So, but here again, all of it is neo-Baroque, neoclassical, built in 1824. So you have in the middle of the place this beautiful statue, which is actually used to be a fountain, and it's dedicated to an artist, which I'm going to admit it, I had never heard of, called Paul Gavarni, who was a Franco-Italian artist. And the fountain was sculpted in 1850 by another artist I had never heard of, Denis Puech. And Paul Gavarni is famous, at least was very famous in the 19th century. To be honest, he has kind of lost a lot of his fame because he was known for depicting scenes of Carnival and Commedia dell'arte. And that was his main claim to fame. Well, enough for a fountain to be built in his honor. So he must have been pretty famous at the time. It's a beautiful sight, and it really is striking because unlike Notre Dame de Lorette, which is unfortunately dirty and dark, this is immaculate and white. So it really is very striking when you get to the Place Saint-Georges. And another piece, oh, there's like a few typos, I'm sorry. I will correct it before sending it to you. The fountain, at the base of the fountain, you have a scene of a carnival in Paris, the Carnival of Paris, which was a very popular carnival in Paris in the 19th century, which was discontinued in 1871 after the Commune. And it's one of the only traces of that carnival that still exists. So it has, an interesting historical importance. Here you have another, so if you remember where we were, this is the building that I'm showing you now from a slightly different angle. This mansion, which is now looks less as a mansion as the Hôtel Thiers and more as a building, was built by La Paiva built by La Paiva is the work of the architect Etienne Renaud. It was also built around the same time in 1840 and features neo-Gothic and Renaissance decorative elements. So who was La Paiva? La Paiva was born as Esther Lachman, and she was, or Lachman, I don't know how you pronounce it, and she was one of the most successful French courtesans of the 19th century. So if you've ever read Balzac or Zola, you know that courtesans, or the other term is demi-mondaine, half demi-mondaine, were really like a staple of Parisian life. They were usually actresses or very beautiful women who had very rich, how can you say, supporters, and who managed to, some of them managed to become extremely wealthy and extremely powerful through their connections. And La Paiva is probably the most notorious, most famous of courtesans because I guess only a few years after having this building built for her, she moved to an even more luxurious mansion on 25 Avenue des Champs-Élysées, one that part of the city, which is in the 8th and the 16th, was being developed. So this part of like the 9th was developed first, and the Champs-Élysées was developed later on in the 1850s and the 1860s. So really, it's unfortunately my photo doesn't really give it doesn't make it justice, because it's a beautiful building. It really is wonderful. So here you have another entrance of the Metropolitan, the metro, and here this time it really is it really starts. It's at the same entry as the Fondation Dauntière, which is really incredible. And you have on the left a little bit of like a little sign that indicates the history of Paris. So each time you have a monument of historical or artistic significance, you have these little signs that actually give you some historical information. So here it's the one for la Hôtel de la Paiva. And another interesting monument close to the Place Saint-Georges is le Théâtre Saint-Georges, which is at the number 51 of La Rue Saint-Georges, and it was inaugurated in 1821. So at the same time, so you just really, when you talk about development and like real estate projects being developed, it all was happening at the same time. And it's one of really the most, it's a small theater, but it's one of the most active theaters. It's existed for like over 150 years. And it really is a staple of French theater. A lot of very good plays. And you can see I've also, if you like François Truffaut, it is and if you know a little bit of the story of the Dernier Métro, the theater where most of the action takes place is the Théâtre Saint-Georges. And here, two other staples of French, of Parisian life. You have the signpost, which followed the Art Nouveau decoration, and that's all of the posters for usually plays or exhibits are posted on these signposts on the right-hand side. And on the left, you have the famous Wallace fountains, which are really probably one of the, which are not probably, but are one of the most famous symbols of 19th century life in Paris. So here are maybe a closer look at one of them. So the Wallace fountains are public drinking fountains named after financed and roughly designed by Sir Richard Wallace. So Richard Wallace, I don't know a lot about him, but he was a financier and an extremely wealthy man in 19th century England. If you've ever been to London, if you ever go to London, you have to go see the Wallace collections probably. And he was fascinated with France. And if you go to the Wallace collection in London, I think he purchased all of Marie Antoinette's furniture, something like that. It's incredible. He was fascinated with France, and and he gave all of these fountains to Paris. So they're large cast iron sculptures scattered throughout the city of Paris, France, and mainly along most of the most frequented sidewalks, although this is not a particularly frequented sidewalk. They're a common occurrence throughout the city. And as of today, there are 67 Wallace fountains. And I put still in use. They're not, some of them are in use, some of them are not in use. I don't think that one was in use when I took a picture, but you can easily find some where you can actually drink water from them. So it's really like they're really beautiful and so typical of French architecture, of Parisian architecture, I mean. So now so can you see my little, yes, here. So we were here. We we walk back to here. That's where this Fontaine Wallace is, Place Gustave Toulouse. And then we're going up. Oh, sorry, we can't really see. And we are going down the Rue de Navarin to, let me move my thing, to the Rue des Martyrs. Here we are, Rue des Martyrs. So Rue des Martyrs basically traverses the 9th arrondissement from south to north. And it's one of the busiest streets of the 9th and one of the nicest parts of the city. It's extremely trendy, extremely chic to shop. So why Rue des Martyrs? Martyrs is obviously martyr, and it derives its name from the patron saint of Paris, and who was also the first bishop of Paris, Saint-Denis, who was unfortunately decapitated during his time during the Roman Empire in the 3rd century, I think under Diocletian, when he decapitated all the many Christians during his reign. So now, and he's an historical. His existence has been proved, but unfortunately, what's I think a lot less likely is that the legend says that he traveled on his road with his head in his hand and died in Montmartre. So I think that's less historically accurate, but it's a very popular myth, a popular legend. I remember being told that legend when I was very young, because we lived in Montmartre, and the Église Saint-Pierre, where his remains are laid down, was something we saw all the time. And it was difficult to understand and believe when I was 5 years old. So I can imagine that you might be a little dumbfounded on the accuracy of this legend. But all that to say that Rue des Martyrs is it's a great place to visit. There are a lot of shops, a lot of trendy restaurants, a lot of cafes, a lot of stores. Whatever you want, it's a great place to hang out in. So here we're going to kind of keep us, not visit any monuments. We're going to more take a look at some of the restaurants, hotels that you can find in this neighborhood. So the first one is L'Hôtel Amour. I know it sounds very French, a hotel dedicated to love. And it's an extremely trendy hotel. I don't know if it's a good hotel. I've never been into any of the rooms, but it has a very good reputation. But aside from all of its trendiness and all of the bad sides of it, it's a very pleasant restaurant. If you want, especially in the summer, I mean, because it has an open courtyard where you can eat outside. It really is charming, and the food is good, simple Parisian food, and it really has a wonderful service. So I highly recommend it next time you go to Paris. So here you have the best boulangerie in the neighborhood, called Del Montel. It really is a very famous boulangerie. I think 15 years ago, it was I don't know if you know that, but in Paris, every year a boulangerie is selected to be the official supplier of bread to the Élysée, which is where the president lives and governs France. So I think 15 years ago, Del Montel was selected. So that, always puts the owner and the store on the radar of true Parisians that are always looking for good bread. So, and you have it there. It really is a wonderful boulangerie. It has delicious bread. And it also, so here you have Arnaud Del Montel, who is the owner of the boulangerie. I did not take the picture. I found it on the net. I think he's a little older now, so I think he has retired. But you have like his delicious bread, set out behind him with like the baguettes on the bottom, and then the different other breads like pain de campagne, pain de son, etc. Delicious bread, and I've owned like cakes, pâtisserie, but really my favorite. It is the cake, what we call in French a cake, like it's spelled like a cake. It's more like a pound cake, and really it's the best. It really they're very good, and I've bought many of them during my years in this neighborhood. So again, if you ever go to this neighborhood, really check out Boulangerie Belmontel. It really is wonderful. And another a wine store, which is now called a caviste. Cave is the cellar, the basement where you store wine, and now you don't. It's not a marchand de vin anymore. It's called the caviste. And Nisa is one of like the trendier caviste in town, but it has not so much great wine, which I think it does, but it has fantastic champagne, really good, inexpensive champagne that you really can buy for a party or for a birthday. So it really is a wonderful place, and the people are very, very nice. And I think, yes, and here you have a carousel or a merry-go-round. And those are also a staple of Parisian life. You have them a little bit everywhere, scattered throughout the city. They said like 20. I think it's more like between 20 to 30. They are usually, they're not necessarily, they're close to tourist attractions. You have one at the Louvre, you have one at the Forum des Halles, you have one under the Eiffel Tower, but you have them a lot close to places like Rue des Martyrs when you have families, children that are, doing shopping or going to school or coming back from school. Usually you have them, and they used to be a seasonal, but now they're really like a year-long feature in Paris. And the word for carousel in French is manège. So aller au manège is one of the favorite things Parisian children like to do. So before moving forward, I think we're halfway, and okay, I'm being very talkative, sorry. Are there any questions? Oh, tu veux que je...
Let's see if we have anybody whose hands, anybody? There's a comment about a book that was written called The Only Street in Paris by Elaine Sciolino or Sciolino. And it is essentially, as far as I understand, some, a history of La Rue des Martyrs. And we have a number of people who have read the book in the room.
And I'm sure it's very interesting because the neighborhood has an interesting story, because now it's extremely trendy, extremely expensive. But for the longest time, it wasn't, when I was growing up, which, was a few years ago, it was not considered prime real estate. The Place Saint-Georges was kind of like the odd place because that was very nice, and that was definitely prime real estate. But Rue des Martyrs and everything around was, nobody really cared about it. Now it's like everybody wants to live there, but I would say 20 years ago, it was still fairly easy to find a house, apartment there. Now it's impossible. It's out, it's extremely costly. I think it's because it's kind of like, it's like between Montmartre and the center of Paris. For the long time, it didn't really have its own personality. So people lived there because they had to, not because they wanted to. But now it's Rue des Martyrs today was a beautiful day in Paris. Rue des Martyrs was packed with people. Talk about urban jungle. That was dense. Oh,
Wait, hold on. There's a little question about
yes.
the restaurant at the Hotel Amour. Is
So
it
like the restaurant is also it's called
the Restaurant Amour or?
yeah, it's like a lot of, I mean, you know that most hotels always have a restaurant. It doesn't, but that one doesn't have a specific, it has a separate entry from to the but it doesn't have a specific name. It's the Restaurant of l'Hôtel Amour. If you go on hotelamour.com, you'll have the hotel, the restaurant.
Super, thank you.
And I recommend it. They have Amy, who lives in Chicago, loves their steak tartare. If you are into raw meat, which is, you know, an acquired taste. But, you know, if you are into that, it's wonderful. And they have like a lot of vegetables. So, you know, it's simple food, but with personality, I'd say. Okay, so let's continue. And, okay, where am I? Should we did that? Okay, so now, okay, oh God. That thing is always not in. Okay, so sorry. We were here and now we're still going back Rue des Martyrs. The merry-go-round is actually here, there, and we're taking like an avenue, which is like fairly, it's large, very quiet, very leafy. Well, unfortunately, it's a little, not that vegetation is not that thriving during the winter, but it really is a beautiful part of the 9th, and it's l'Avenue Truden. And we're going to walk to it to a place called the Square d'Anvers. And at the Square d'Anvers, you have something which is really, for me, the epitome of Parisian life, which is the open market, the farmer's market, le marché. So really the only reason to go to Square d'Anvers, aside from the metro station, is the open market. It's on Friday afternoons. It's a small market, but you can have, there's a wonderful place that sells cheese from Auvergne, so Bleu d'Auvergne, Saint-Nectaire, and the third one, but wonderful Saint-Nectaire and wonderful Bleu d'Auvergne, really delicious. So open market. So the first let's have like a bit of information on the open market. So the Paris markets like trace back to around the 5th century, which is, you know, people need food, so that's not surprising. The first one was called Palu and was, if you Paris, the Ile de la Cité where Notre Dame is built, that island was the first incarnation of Paris, called Lutetia, when it was a Gallo-Roman city. And now it has, you know, like a lot of the older open markets and even covered markets are being reopened. Most notably, Les Enfants Rouges, which is in the 3rd arrondissement in 2001. And now you have about 90 markets of all shapes, sizes, and specialties. So you have, this is a very small one, but you have huge ones, some that go on from like miles and miles, and basically it's you know, it provides, I would say, like 50% of all food purchases of Parisians, because you have, first of all, it's fresh, so you know that what you're buying is fresh. It's depending where you are, but it's usually a less expensive option than, you know, the supermarket. And you have and you also have, you know, like it's a definite experience. Everybody does its marché on Sunday morning. Usually, like, markets can be open at different times, but usually you always have like the bigger ones, the major ones are open on Sunday morning. And faire le marché is one of the fundamentals of Parisian life. So let me, like, so you can buy cheese, You can buy delicatessen, like different types of products, but you will always find fruit and vegetables. And as we say in French, primeur. You have, of course, charcuterie and sometimes boucherie, but so charcuterie is pork products. And this is a very good one. They have delicious saucisson. I mean, I don't eat pork anymore, but wonderful. And you have a lot of fish stores. So it's also the opportunity because fish stores are becoming less and less frequent in Paris. It's more difficult to find them. And when you go to a marché, you will have, you will be able to buy sea products very easily. And they're usually very good quality because freshness is really like the cornerstone of buying of fish products. So you really need to be, sure that it's good quality. So, I mean, I'm sure if when you go back to Paris, you have to experience an open market. It really is extremely fun. People are very nice. And that's nothing. This is a tiny one. You can have, foods from all over the world, and they're all specialized in something. You can have I didn't take it, but you have usually like the shop that sells, like grains and olives and candy. So it really is quite an experience. And it's a great way to practice your French. So I definitely recommend it. So where am I? Okay, let me again move. It always is in there. Okay, so now we are leaving the 9th. When you get to Place d'Anvers, you are actually leaving the 9th and entering the 18th arrondissement. And so the open market was here, and we are going to the Marché Saint-Pierre. So let's say you bought cheese, you bought fruit and vegetables, you bought a little bit of charcuterie, a little bit of fish, and now you need to buy some material because you are, I don't know, sewing new curtains for your house.
Pursue.
Well,
Pursue.
Well,
You're making a tablecloth.
You're making a tablecloth, exactly, Victoria. Coudre une nappe. Alors, you go to the Marché Saint-Pierre. So Marché Saint-Pierre is not one marché, but it's an area called the Marché Saint-Pierre, which, brings together, or which kind of like unites like many different types of stores, which have one common denominator, is that there are fabric stores. You can, there upholstery, decoration, fabric, buttons, thread, any type of article you need to do sewing, or I think you can even buy wool, and but anything that's sewing and knitting is definitely at the Marché Saint-Pierre. And our mother, who is a lifelong sewer, spends a lot of time there. So you can have there's some high-end material, but also some very cheap material. You have material from all over the world. There's a lot of, because when you are at the Marché Saint-Pierre, you're close to the more ethnically diverse neighborhoods of the 18th. So you have a lot of African fabric. So it really is very fun. Here you have Dreyfus, which is really like the supermarket of material. That's the biggest store, and it's on, I think, 6 levels, and you have everything from like big swaths of material to like tiny buttons, to small thread, and to small needles. So really anything for the people who like to sew, to knit, to put things together for the house. And that's a view of the garden that's at the bottom of the Sacré-Cœur. You don't see the Sacré-Cœur, but you'll seen it. And here you have something that's just next to the Marché Saint-Pierre. It's called the Halles Saint-Pierre. And it was, there's another typo, sorry. It's like a museum dedicated to what they call naive art, which is anything that is industrial urban art that can be that is exposed in market that was turned into a museum in 1986. So it's like, unlike it's more of a contemporary gallery, really. It's like museum is maybe a misnomer, but it really is a very active, very funky type of environment where, like, the boundaries of what we consider art and what we consider more like graffiti and like a brute, singular outside art come together in a very interesting and very lively environment. So there are a lot of exhibits that really usually bring people art from like lesser known parts of the world, such as Africa, for instance. And they also have a permanent exhibit collection that now has 829 works. So again, I really recommend it if you go. And it's a really great place because it used to be an old market. Let me just show it to you. So this was not an open market, it was a covered market, and there were many of them. And there are few and fewer closed markets because they're like more difficult to keep together, and they're usually very limited in their space. So a lot of them have been converted into other things, such as museums. Okay, so now here the Halles Saint-Pierre is here, like the Marché Saint-Pierre is basically all of this. And we are walking up Rue Ronsard and Rue Paul Albert and so here, this part is, so this is like the garden that is at the bottom of the Sacré-Cœur, and these are the stairs that will lead us to the half, the half. I can't find the word, like the
halfway point.
Yeah, the half point between the bottom of the garden and the Sacré-Cœur. Sorry, it was a little complicated way of saying it, and it's probably one of my favorite parts of the neighborhood. It really doesn't. This area doesn't really have a name. It's not a place. It's more that intersection of different streets, the Rue Maurice Utrillo and the Rue Paul Albert. It used to be considered like Place Sainte-Marie, and there's another typo. Sorry about that, but it lost that name and now is just known as the intersection between la Rue Maurice Utrillo and la Rue Paul Albert. But really, it's really charming. And if you're ever in Paris and it's the summer and you want to spend the evening in a lively and welcoming place, I would definitely recommend this cafe called or it's actually a restaurant also called L'été en Pente Douce. I love the explosion of colors it gives us. It used to be a very trendy place. It has kind of become more like a funky offbeat place, but in the summer when everything is like alight with lights and candles, it really is magical. It's a magical place. And so if you're here and you're looking at this, your back is your back is facing the gardens, and if you turn around, you have like the mid-level of the gardens that are in front of the Sacré-Cœur. So you have gone up, and now you need to go back a second time. For some reason, they've closed down this entry. That's something that happens a lot in Paris. They always try to kind of limit the access to these open areas, which is, I think, a little self-defeating, but that's how the open spaces and the open gardens of Paris are managed. And you have the stairs of la Rue Maurice Utrillo, which is another beautiful part. So we're going to go up them to go to the Sacré-Cœur. So probably the most famous monument in our walk. And it has a very interesting story. So it was designed by an architect called Paul Abadie, and the construction began in 1875, but was only completed in 1914. So it was over 40 years of construction, and it was only consecrated in 1919 by the Pope, which is why it is a basilica, because all churches that are consecrated by the Pope are called basilicas. So I don't, it's a very famous building, obviously, but it has a difficult story behind it, because it's obviously like it's a staple of French of Parisian architecture, but it's also a very political and cultural monument, because it represents both, because it was after two of the most traumatic moments French history, with the War of 1870, which I think, if you know anything about French history, was lost by Napoleon III. And it came also after the siege, and then the Commune of Paris in 1871, which was squashed by in horrendous fashion by the government of the man that you met later on, who Adolphe Thiers, who had built his house next to the Place Saint-Georges. So Adolphe Thiers was the prime minister of the government in 1871 that negotiated with the Prussians the French defeat, and the conditions were so horrendous that the people of Paris rebelled, and that's what you called the Commune, which is a very interesting moment in Parisian history and in French history, and I really recommend that you learn more about it. But it was a horrendously brutal experience, and a lot of people lost their life or were exiled or had to flee France in order to survive the butchery. So the Sacré-Cœur was built after that. As I said, as a way to repent for the defeat of the Franco-Prussian War, but also as a way to more or less renegotiate the peace and stability with the people of Paris. So, but because it is a religious symbol, and the Commune was a definitely anti experience, a lot of people still consider it as an insult. And I remember when I was growing up, a lot of people didn't like the Sacré-Cœur. They thought it was ridiculous, but also quote unquote fascist symbol. So it's definitely not anymore. I don't see that type of conversation happening anymore. But I remember when maybe when I was 10 or 12, I was surprised how many people did not like the Sacré-Cœur. And granted, it's a fairly strange monument because it really is unique in itself. And instead of, emulating the more like common Italian style, it emulates the Romano-Byzantine features. So it's not a Catholic cross, but it's a Orthodox cross. So basically like a plus. And it has, it features a lot of frescoes made of mosaics. And I think some of them are the biggest mosaics ever built. So yeah, it's one of the largest mosaics in the world. So it's a very startling, because very un-French monument, but I think it gives first of all, it gives it its beauty, but it kind of gives it's like the feeling that it was built and it's out of time. It really is a very specific experience of Paris, and should be visited as it is. Where are we? So, and of course, when you have finally made it to the top of the Sacré-Cœur, you have a gorgeous view over Paris. So it really is, a wonderful view, and it's very busy. During the summer, that's nothing. I took these pictures. It was, I think, Tuesday morning. It was empty, but now today is a nice day. Probably around 5 o'clock, the stairs will be packed with people listening to music, having fun together. It really is a very lively part of the city. And you have this wonderful view over Paris. So it really is a one-of-a-kind experience. And so what time is it? Oh, it's 7 o'clock. So, and we're terminé. Okay,
11
so we're
o'clock
walking.
here.
So we're walking towards, sorry, let me move this. It's always in the way, sorry. Okay, so we were here and we are going to the Place du Tertre, which is really not far away. You just have to go up Rue Saint-Éleuthère to the Place du Tertre. So, which I didn't know, the Place du Tertre was opened as a square in 1635 as the Montmartre Village Central Square. And from the end of the 18th century until World War I, the whole Montmartre Bohème could be seen here, painters, songwriters, poets. So really from 1875 to 1920, this was really like the center of art in Europe, basically. Artists from all over the world and all over Europe came here, congregated in Montmartre and the Place du Tertre to express their art and experiment. So of course, the most famous artist who lived in this neighborhood was Pablo Picasso. He lived here in the 1910s, I think. And his studio was just a little further down, Rue Norvins. So now as you know, it's less about experimentation of art and more the commercial side of art. So it's very much a tourist attraction, but it's still a very nice place. So that's, even though that was not the same day. I didn't take that picture. That was like a day, it was probably like a day like today, where there were like hordes of people. So that's the reality of the Sacré-Cœur. But don't be taken aback. It really is fun, but it's very commercial. But it's one in a kind. There's no place like Place du Tertre in the world. If you kind of step back a little bit, you'll find a little more space and a little more breathing space, which gives you the opportunity of seeing the Place du Tertre with a little more perspective and a little more quiet. And also, you might not know, but going back to Rue des Martyrs and going back to Saint-Denis, so Saint-Denis, when he was decapitated, he walked up this with his head under his shoulder. He walked up and died there. And actually, the remains of Saint-Denis are buried in this church, which was actually part of a much broader, much bigger monastery or abbey. I don't know if it's a monastery or an abbey, but it was which was really a religious highlight until I think the French Revolution, where again everything was destroyed. So the church you have here was built on top of the church that was built in 1847. So, and I think there's still part of it that is from the original building. So you have here probably one of the oldest buildings in Paris, because 12th century, that was a long time ago, built by Louis VI. So, and it was a religious, it was a lot of people pilgrims would come from all over France to visit the burial site of Saint-Denis. And yes, there you go. When you reach the Le Place du Théâtre, we have reached our destination. So there you go.
Super. There's one question here, James. Roseanne wants to know approximately how long is the walk from start to finish?
Well, that's one of the things we really aim. I think you can do it in an hour. I mean, if you're stopping at, buying things, and yeah, it might take you longer, but really if your only goal is to go from point A to point B and it's not a big walk. It goes up. So that's a little, there's stairs. And so it might be a little bit of and of course the goal, but it's not a big walk. I would say maybe like 60 to 90 minutes. And of course, if you're going to stop at the open market and go to boulangerie and maybe go get a cafe somewhere, it might be like a, whole afternoon affair. So
there is also, there was a question a little bit earlier about les enfants rouges.
So Les Enfants Rouges is an open market, but it's not actually an open market. It's a closed market. It's in a building, and that's in the third. It's close to la Rue de Bretagne. So if you go to, if you see where République is, the Metro République, it's like big open space République, it's south of that. Very nice neighborhood. Les Enfants Rouges, yeah. It's very, I would not consider, even though it's it's one of the oldest open markets in Paris, I would not consider that as like the typical open market experience in Paris. It's, very trendy and very expensive, and but it's definitely worth the visit. I mean, that whole neighborhood, the third, it's beautiful. The north of the Marais, it's really nice.
Also, I think it's worth mentioning, James, that our father was an artist on La Place du Théâtre.
Yes, he was. He was. He actually was. Let me go back up. Oh, wait. Sorry. He was, actually, was it there?
Yeah, yeah, it would have been.
He would have been here, I think. Yeah. Yes, he would have been here.
Right. If you
Yeah,
go,
he was the artist at Place du Théâtre for a long time.
Yeah,
Many years. Many years.
And
when the Place still had a little bit of that bohème spirit, where it was not, my father was not friends with Picasso, and but he.
Yes, he was. Come on.
No, but so it I think the artist experimentation era had was over, but there was still very much a bohème type of atmosphere. It was very funky at the time. Yes.
Yes, Mora bought some paintings, a couple of paintings back in 1972.
Well, yes.
So that our father would have been there in 1972. Absolutely.
Yes, he definitely was. Yes, he was. And there were some really good artists. At the time, it wasn't like, Pablo Picasso wasn't exposing there, but you had very good artists. It wasn't. You didn't have anything that was mass produced or that was, kind of like a ripoff. All of them were actually done by artists. You liked it or not, that's another story. But there was no scam at the time.
There used to be some very good restaurants up on the Place du Théâtre. Do you still recommend any, James?
No. I went to a cafe and it was no. It's
all right.
It's not great, but you don't have to. But then again, there are just so many restaurants. It's definitely worth kind of checking out. But I would not recommend that area to find a good restaurant. But there are so many others. I mean, I would recommend Les Tempes en Douce for like a simple lunch, or l'Hôtel Amour for like an evening, for a dinner. So yeah.
Elizabeth wants to know when we can all go on a field trip.
Well, I mean, like, how long? Of course.
Let's
Well,
go.
I'm here, so it's not a, I'm here, so the effort is more on your side of things.
For sure. Does anybody have another question before we
Okay, I say student
conclude?
sales, like I'm reading a book right now called American Paris. Oof. Oof. Ah, good. Yes. Yes, the occupation is an interesting part of French history,
For sure.
especially for artists. I mean, they had to cope with it, but it's, like it was a strange time, like people showed their true colors, and some of those colors were not great. So
You bet. Moha has a question.
sure.
Yes, the first stop, and you mentioned that there was a house that in English you would call it a townhouse, but I don't remember what the French name was.
It's an hôtel particulier, hotel, like a
Like a
particular
private
hotel.
hotel.
Okay.
It's like a private owned hotel. So a particulier, as for like in French, a particulier is an individual, a particulier. So it's a hotel owned by one person or one family. And you have a lot of them in this neighborhood. Like if you've ever been to the Marais, a lot of like the really nice houses are considered hôtel particulier. And that's where so it's kind of like a town castle. Some of them are really fat.
We have a few in the family, don't we, James?
I know, yes. There's so many, we don't know what to do with them.
Super. Anybody else with a comment or a question? Anybody? Okay, I don't see any hands raised unless I'm missing something. Someone? Nope, I don't think so. So James.
Bravo, James.
Oh,
Oh,
thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm happy. Yeah, it was fun. It was fun.
Yeah.
Fun.
for sure. It was
I
fun.
I hope you discovered things that you didn't, you hadn't known about, and it was interactive enough to be engaging. That was my main concern, that like it's a nice thing to see pictures, but that is it going to be engaging enough? And I hope it was.
Very good. Very good.
Absolutely, James.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, James.
I thank you, James, for sharing your experiences and your knowledge of the neighborhood and of
Merci beaucoup.
Paris. And I look forward to the next one.
Oh, hi. Yes. Yes. We'll think about it.
It takes a little while to put together, but
Well, because it was the first time. I mean, like the first time around is always, I didn't know the level of information. I didn't know the formatting. I didn't know how all of this was going to, now it's easier, but it's not, again, it's not a question of replicating. It's a question of improving. So we'll see how what we'll do next time.
absolutely.
Hey,
Wait,
thank you so
Stephanie?
much.
Wait, Stephanie?
James, what was so neat about it is I could keep up with the whole group. I wasn't lagging behind.
Yes, that is the advantage of virtual moving. You don't your
So
mind
you didn't have to climb the stairs.
Yeah, your
Yeah,
mind is doing all of the
exactly.
effort. So good.
Super.
Okay, Shirley has a question.
Yes, she does. Oh, Shirley, you have to unmute.
You're muted.
There was a restaurant in Place du Tertre, which was called when I was there in 2009, Maison de la Mère Catherine.
Oh, yes.
Catherine.
Is it still there?
Yeah, it is. And that was the most famous, Mère Catherine was the most famous restaurant. And I think it's probably still worth the effort, but it's is it, if you like places like that is, you have to go, it's difficult to know if it's still worth, because it's probably not that cheap. It's probably, and you have to know, and getting there is not that easy. So it's not considered like a highlight of French gastronomy. So it's like, if you're there, why not? But don't especially go there just to see this, just to go eat at Nacatri.
The owner gave us, or gave me, a menu, which I don't know if you've ever been there, but it's like 11 by 14, and there's like 10 pages that are laminated. And
Oh,
that in itself was worth going for.
Yeah, well, yeah, and that's usually that's when you can start, wondering if the food is, usually like real restaurants in Paris have offer very little choice. Usually they, it follows the market. When you have a very large fixed menu, that's when you can start wondering if everything is that fresh. But when you are in that situation, go, take the basics, choose the basics, like stick feet,
Thank you very, very much, James. This was
You're welcome.
All right, guys. That's it for
Excellent.
today.
Merci beaucoup.
Bye, everybody.
Thank
See
you so
next
much.
time.
Thank you so
revoir.
much for participating, and we'll see you again.
Thank
Au
you.
revoir.
Au revoir.
Au revoir.
Merci à
Au
vous.
revoir.
Et merci à James. Au revoir.
Merci.
Merci,
Au
James.
revoir.
Merci.
Au revoir.
Tu déconnectes?
Je vais déconnecter. Tu peux arrêter le partage.
Ouais.
Super. Et je vais déconnecter parce que j'enseigne. Salut Stéphanie. J'enseigne dans 10 minutes. Donc,
Ah bon, d'accord. Bon, voilà.
donc je te parlerai un peu plus tard. Ok.
Ça marche.
Ok.
Tchou, tchou. Bye bye.
Salut.
Tchou,
Ciao,
tchou.
ciao.
Ciao, ciao.